So now I've moved to another normal heart, and I've dissected it to replicate the parasternal long axis echocardiographic section. Here is the left atrium. We see the parietal part of the atrioventricular junction that is inferior. We see the superior part of the atrioventricular junction that is in continuity with the aortic root. And here we see the fibrous continuity between the aortic leaflet of the mitral valve and one of the leaflets guarding the aortic root. If we now close in, we can see the boundaries of the aortic root. Marking the distal extent of the root is the sinutubular junction. And this is a discrete ridge between the aortic valvar sinuses and the tubular component of the aorta. We then see very nicely how the leaflets of the aortic root are hinged in semilunar fashion from the aortic valvar sinuses. Now you note that I am calling these structures the leaflets. I think this is a much better way of describing these moving components of the aortic root than calling them cusps, as is often the case, because the ordinary meaning of a cusp is a point or elevation. And here, in fact, is the point of the semilunar hinge of the aortic valvar leaflet. It is at the sinutubular junction, where it meets the corresponding point of the adjacent leaflet. So, in my opinion, it's far better to describe these moving elements as the leaflets rather than as the cusps. The key to understanding the anatomy of the aortic root is then to appreciate the hinge lines of these semilunar leaflets. Because if we look at this point, the anterosuperior part of the root, we see where the hinge of the semilunar leaflet is coincident with the anatomic ventriculo-arterial junction. At this point, the musculature of the septum gives way to the fibrocollagenous wall of the aortic valvar sinus. But if we then take a line from this anatomic ventriculo-arterial junction, we see that the hinge line of this leaflet of the aortic root dips below the anatomic junction, and because of that, if we look down into the base of the sinus, we see that there is a crescent of musculature that is incorporated as part of the sinus. And we can then see how the leaflets then extend up to the sinutubular junction so that fibrous triangles are incorporated as the most distal extensions of the ventricular outflow tract. And it is this interdigitation of the semilunar hinge lines of the aortic valvar leaflets with the supporting ventricular structures that gives so many problems in describing the so-called valvar annulus.